Hi, my name's ABIS. Welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to break down my track Grains of Suna, which is out now on Blackout, part of their 10-year of Blackout album project. So we're going to dive into this project now. Let's get cracking. Okay, this is the Grains of Suna project. This is the full project where it was mixed and mastered and composed. There's quite a few different elements to the track. If you haven't heard the track, first of all, probably go and listen to it on Spotify, because I'm not going to play it here. I'm just going to go through all the elements and show you how I made each element and the thought process behind everything. So let's get cracking. I'm going to start from the front. So we'll start at the intro. The first idea of the track I had was actually the second part, which is the vocals here. So I actually started out with that in a fresh project. I was just doing some experiments, like recording vocals, like really low vocals of me going oh, etc. And then I put them in Melodyne and started playing with them. So I needed a kind of intro bed to introduce those vocals. So I put together a few different kind of pads and instruments to try and blend them together to make one kind of drone. So this is what you hear. So the atmosphere is coming from these four main elements here. So we've got a string section, which is just pre-recorded from an orchestra library. And I just put it in a sampler and pitched it down. I also put that pitch bend on it to try and create a bit of tension. Try and give the impression that the melody is actually going to go somewhere rather than it just holding one note. I also put a vocal in there, which I, again, recorded myself. And again, these are pitched down like an octave, maybe even 2 octaves. And I felt like I needed something a bit synthesized over this. So I also took an instance of Serum, which is just a simple patch I've made from my library or from my presets, heavily delayed. And above that, I just wanted to make something rhythmic in the intro, so the tempo was slightly obvious from the start. So there's no reference to the tempo when the vocal drops in the next section, so I wanted to kind of emphasize that, and I just used some samples I made from like bells and whatnot. And there's some bongo hits here. And there's also a bowl gong. So just setting the tone for the vocal, really. Again, that just repeats. And that transitions really nicely into this vocal section here. So let's take a look at that. So as I mentioned before, I was just really experimenting one day, being a bit stupid and trying to record some vocals. I'm really no singer. So all I did was record some really low vocals, like kind of throat, kind of really low throat things. And then what I kind of did is I took the vocal, and because obviously I couldn't sing this actual long, I think it's like 24 seconds, 22 seconds, something like that. I obviously couldn't sing that long, so basically I just used an X-fade. So I took a couple of different takes, X-faded them in, made a really long audio file of it. So I had a really long vocal to play with. And then I ended up putting them all in Melodyne and cutting up that really long note so I could make a legato between different notes. And then I kind of made a chord from that. So you've got 2 low ones here. And if you listen to the actual vocal, it actually really doesn't sound that good. There's kind of, you can hear it's been pitched down with melodyne, and you can hear kind of the actual samples in the sample being a bit pulled and pushed around. But that didn't really bother me when I was doing this. So I'd got the two low ones. Those are just basically 2 octaves. And then I added a higher note, and then I added another higher note here. I then just pitched one left and one right, so they sound like this together. And then that just extends to the next section. I think what's really cool about this, individually they don't really sound that great. The vocals, you can hear they've been pitched and putting melodyne, but all together it kind of creates a really cool bed of atmosphere. So that was a really cool thing. I also backed this up with a kind of riser, kind of shepherd tone kind of sound. This was basically a recording of a guitar I did, and again I put it in pull stretch. I think I played like for instance like an E and a D sharp, so it's kind of really really intense, kind of the 2 notes kind of modulating together, like you would do with the Reese, for example. And then what I did is I put it in pull stretch, stretched it all out, so it was like a 30-minute file. And then I pitch one up and pitch one down, which is kind of replicating what they call shepherd tone. Give that kind of real tension. So that's the intro and the vocal. Now let's talk about some of the orchestra in the next section. So this is the part where some of the orchestra bits and instruments come in. They are backed up with synths and stuff, but I'll go through that in a second. What I quickly wanted to talk about first was actually a really simple technique and a really efficient way to write parts for an orchestra. I've got them in different groups here. So I've got my brass sections here, which consist of like a low brass, trombone, tuba, French horns, trumpet, etc. I've got a really basic string section here, which is just some very basic string elements, bass, cello, violin. I also have a few synths just to bed over the top. I've got a choir in the background, and I've got the main vocals, and I've got some percussion elements. What I typically do if I want to write a section like this in electronic music, or even when I'm scoring orchestral music, what I typically do is kind of sketch out the chords before. So at the top of the project, I've got this kind of piano sketch here, where I'll kind of write the melody before, and then what I'll do is I'll just use this MIDI file and then drop it onto my orchestral instruments. So I started off this by writing basically 4 chords. These are almost following the E harmonic minor scale. What's kind of cool actually is I hardly ever write kind of in major, but this the first 3 chords are major chords. So that's kind of that was kind of cool actually, because I hardly ever do that. So it kind of starts on B major, which is B, D sharp, F sharp, and then we've got a C major 7th, which is the C, E, G, and the B is the 7th. And you can see the theme. I'm holding the B here to keep the tension on the first 3 chords, and then I'm just raising it to a C on the last one, just to give the listener the idea that something else is going to happen, or there's a change going to come. And then the third one is a G major 7th, so G, B, D, and F sharp in there as well. And then the last chord is a C minor, which is inverted into a D sharp. And the minor chord obviously brings the kind of evil element, the twist to it, to really give the impression that, okay, something's going to happen here. So yeah, I sketch it out like this, basically. So you can see that last chord really gives attention. It's kind of flirting with flirting with that diminished feel at the end. So what I would do is I would typically sketch this out on piano, and then I would take this MIDI file and start dropping it onto the instruments that I want. So with this section, I knew I wanted it to be loud in terms of orchestra. So I obviously needed a brass section. So what I did is I'll take that MIDI file, I'll just drop it into here. So for the orchestra, I'm exclusively using the East-West East-West kits. They have really good monthly fee which you can pay, and you can get absolutely thousands of instruments. What I typically do is I have one instance of the East-West Opus software running. I'll typically have one for brass, one for strings, and any other one for woodwinds or any other instruments I need. This one is a brass one, and I'll just play this. So again, on that B major kind of lift-off sound, which is really distinctive. Really simple. I've just got a low brasses. I doing an octave. I've got trombone, which is kind of cool because it's got a much, it's got a really quite a broad scale trombone. So we also opted to take the D sharp and the F higher one as well, just to give it as much power as I can. And I got some French horns and trumpets backing that up as well. Again, this is the string section. One of the most important things for the string section is the bass, because it gives it a lot of weight in the low end. I've just got some detail violin legato here, just playing a slight melody over the top of it. It's not super present in the mix, but I wanted to I did want some kind of development in the melody. You kind of more feel it than hear it. So that's strings, and then what I did is I added 2 synths over it. Kind of vocally synth. And that kind of pitch bend's cool as well. And then the last thing, I added a women's choir, which is super soft in the background. And then I got the main vocals here, which are also actually from the same library, the East-West library. There's a really cool kit called, I think it's Voices of the Emperors or something like that, which is also cool. So I combined one of those with also one which I sung myself as well, which is kind of weird because they sound kind of close. My version is obviously pitched up, but this vocal really set the scene. It kind of fitted with that vibe I was going for. And then there's one of me here, which I think I've used in a tune before, but I'm not sure. Anyway, percussion is actually really simple here. So again, I kind of knew on this section I didn't want any kind of fast drums. I wanted kind of that open kind of kind of feeling, rather than it being dad or something like that. And my idea was to have this kind of open and long notes, and then the next section have it more staccato, kind of scatissimo sound, really short notes, give that energy. So again, really simple, just some simples, and I put a kick on the first two because I just felt it needed that power there. You'll also notice I have a sub as well, and the sub is super quiet. It's almost impossible to pick up. There's no saturation on it whatsoever. It's just filling that really low, that low sub, where the brasses would be obviously an octave up from that. So that just reinforces the whole thing. So yeah, that's the first part of the orchestra. And then it moves over to the transitioning into drum and bass kind of song. And here I wanted to I didn't want to kind of switch from like orchestra brasses straight into kind of a resound. I wanted to try and find a transition, and I wanted to find something which was super energetic. So again, I kind of sketched out in my piano sketch. I sketched out a really short staccato kind of riff. So if I just put these together, I'll show you how they sound. So on the last note, we finish here. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to create like a kind of riser in the melody, but kind of keep it in the scale, in the E harmonic scale. So, and I wanted to keep the energy. I wanted to keep it short with short hits. So I kind of sketched this out, and then I used another patch, which is the brass shorts here. So it's almost the same instruments as the below patch, the sustains. So I've got low brass, tuba, trombone, French horns, trumpets, and I've also got some muted versions here, muted trumpets, muted trombones. So I've pretty much copied that MIDI file down to the relevant instruments. Again, this is pretty kind of action film style, but it kind of worked. So I wanted to kind of back that up with some kind of drum and bass sounding kind of drums. So what I did was I kind of built a kind of drum and bass really fast pattern. And I started with these toms here, and these are from Addictive Drums. So super short, not that much low end in them. They're kind of more higher in the frequency scale. Just because I wanted to make a little bit of room for the brass instruments. So yeah. Yeah, so super intense, super fast, almost like too overwhelming. And then this is where it transitions into the respace. We introduce the respace, so let's dive into that. Okay, so here is where it kind of makes the biggest switch, I guess, in the tune. That's where the kind of respace comes in. Basically, the respace consists of the actual res, and I put an overlay on it. So let's take a look at them both. I'll just quickly play that. And then it builds up into the drop. The res is exactly the same in this section here as it is in the drop. And basically the res is a very old classical way, or the way I made it is a very old classical way. I've done this technique for years now, and it's kind of tried and tested. And that is basically using a saw wave and detuning one. What I've done here is I typically put a macro on the fine pitch just so I can control the actual modulation, so the movement in it. If I play this now. So that's without any detuning. It's pretty static, and then we take it down. So the macro just gives me a bit more freedom of control. Really, it's a bit easier to use than using the fine assignment modulator up here. So that's why I do that. So yeah, I've got 2 saw waves, and I've just got an octave below it. I've just got a really clean sine wave, and it's really, really simple. If I take the processing off though, it's going to probably sound absolutely shocking. So let's have a listen. Yeah, so as you can probably tell, all the energy, everything, the whole sound is being controlled by processing. And that's just really a whole ton of distortion and some slight modulation. So really the main amount of work is being done by this guitar rig here. I've used guitar rig for years and still go back to it a lot, especially really good for Reese's. I love the actual cabinet heads. Sorry. What I typically do, I've got a patch where where it automatically loads in my series of like cabinet heads, and these are my favourite ones. So what I can do is when I'm working on a bass or a Reese, I can just flick through these and see which one I like. Or yeah, maybe use a combination of the 2 or 3, maybe in some rare cases. But this gives me really a quick workflow because I can quickly decide on a cabinet quickly and then fine tune it from there. So this instance, it was the hot solo. And with that, I've used. I typically wouldn't do this, but it's with this type of Reese's. Really, kind of happy accidents happen a lot, and this was one of those cases. So I've got the riff filter here, which is actually an overtone filter. I wouldn't do this normally, but it just sounded really good, and I used lots of spread on there, lots of resonance. So if I take those filters off, still sounds pretty okay, but you're kind of losing that kind of weird instability, which is really cool in a Reese sometimes. Yeah, it's phasing. It's probably phasing in some respect, but that's kind of what's making it sound cool, in my opinion. So it's kind of, you have to kind of find that balance between the physics of sound and also how it sounds basically. So these are really helpful. Again, you can put flanges, you can put phasers, and if you do that pre-distortion, it's actually really cool because the distortion kind of stabilizes it a little bit and kind of pushes it so hard it kind of creates these really cool overtones in your sound. So that's a really nice thing to do, especially on Reese's. Following the guitar rig is just got some surgical EQs here. And this is quite typical where I'll load one EQ and maybe put a bell, and then I'll work on the tune a bit more, and then I'll think about, okay, maybe I need a bit of room in say 200, around the 200-300 hertz region, and then I would add another EQ. So that's the reason why there's so many EQs here rather than it will be in one EQ. So just some utility stuff here. With this mid-side processing, notching out a little bit here, I think probably just to make a bit of room for the snare. Again, I'm using Isotope Trash, just a really small mix. So that's just bringing out loads of high end, really crunching that. And mids are doing nothing, and the low end is also doing nothing. So that's multi-band distortion. And then the last EQs are just easing up this peak here. And I think this is automated somewhere down the line. Again, I've got a reverb. The reverb actually turns off on the drop. You can hear the sidechain kicking there, obviously. And then to finish off the chain, I have a little M utility, which is just blocking any DC signal that may be coming through. That happens quite a lot if you're using loads of distortion like guitar amps, so just check that. And that's basically it. I found when I made this Reese and I put some drums over it, I felt it was lacking something. And so what I thought would be cool is to layer the Reese with the kind of synth over the top of it. And I thought it'd be cool to kind of make some chords instead of it following the same note. So I layered it with this really intense serum patch, and you can hear it's got so much reverb on it. But that's what kind of makes it cool. It kind of sets it really far back in the mix. It's definitely noticeable when it drops, but I try to set it far back as possible, trying to keep that balance between it being present in the mix and also kind of just floating around. So again, this is just a really simple patch. It kind of sounds like a kind of distorted guitar. So I'm using guitar rig again. Yeah, so almost a similar processing to the Reese. So again, I'm using Rift, I'm using comb filter, trash, guitar rig, and then there's loads of reverb on that, of course. So if I drop the tune without this overlaying synth, sounds cool, but it kind of missed that. I kind of missed that sense of like tension. And I also thought that because the intro is very kind of, very harmonically driven, there's chords and there's a bit of a complex chord structure going on. I thought it might be cool to try and push that theme also into the drop, and I thought this might be a cool way. So that really gives the tension. It enables me to kind of play around with that question and answer kind of drop feel, where 4 drops you have one bass and the next 4 drops you have another bass doing a different melody, which I really love to do always. So yeah, that's the Reese, and that is the overlay. The next section in terms of bass is this patch called Phasey 02. So what I typically do in terms of writing basses, I typically have sample sessions where I'll write I'll try and make loads of patches, and then I'll save them in a particular folder, labeled like per month. And then when I'm writing a tune, I can quickly grab them and redefine them in the tune. So this is very, very, very modulated Reese. This basically consists of 2 patches. This was definitely an happy accident. I must have made this patch about 3 or 4 years ago. I can't remember, but what I do remember is I was really messing with lots of waveforms, and it's really, really a weird patch because these waveforms look super strange. But it just kind of all come together, and it's super tuned. Not much filtering going on here. I'm trying to get the movement by detuning. So I've got a macro on both the detune function, which I'm automating. slightly move. I found that when you were detuning, you kind of got a different tone, so I kind of used that instead. I've also got one for the blend as well. So, because that sound is so like unstable, I decided to just put a really simple sub under it. And you can hear the kind of top end whistle as well, but that kind of fit with the bass line, so I'll play these two together. Typically I would kind of low pass a sub like this, but I kind of felt it like it had the kind of air, like that air quality to it, you know, that kind of hoovering sound. So I kind of decided to leave that in, and I thought that kind of mixed together quite well. In terms of processing, in their own groups, there's not much going on, but again, let me quickly run through here. I've just again distorted it with some wave shaping. I've used trash again. Used a bit of OTT, which is just bringing that a bit high end. Very mild. I've got some EQs, which are slightly automated here, just to kind of fade it out in sections and control it a bit better in the top end. And I've got some utility EQ here with the mid side. Again, a little bit of distortion. These are all doing very small amounts of distortion, but when you put them together, yeah, it is a lot of distortion. So again, just some EQ touch-ups at the end when I was probably doing the final mix, just controlling, taking that really high end out because I really didn't need that. Again, some more EQ bits. Yeah, so that's a really interesting sound, and one of the main kind of elements why this is kind of sounding cool, I guess, is because of the actual melody. There's so much movement in the actual notes itself, which kind of maybe disguises the sound a little bit. If you just had this kind of one note, it would sound cool, but I think the interest comes from the actual melody here. So yeah, super energetic, moves around a lot, which is really cool. So those are the two main bass sounds. What I've done is I've used some really random samples that I had just to fill out the rest. So I kind of like to do that a lot. This was the actual same patch. This one here, just really simple, really simple bass sound, and the rest are exactly the same. Really random bass sounds again. These are all from my sample library, which I pre-made. These are just audio files, which I've basically just cut up into sections. So again, this is pre-made samples that I would just make on a rainy day and put in a folder and stumble across one day. So that was the original sample, and I just cut it up really simply. And then we have a kind of release section at the end here. So that's a different Reese this time. I thought it might be fun to just put a section in there. And this is very similar to the Reese I made earlier. It's really overdone. So it's almost the same patch that I did before. Instead of using the sub in the sub oscillator, I've split it up here. No particular reason. It was just on that particular day I decided to split it. And again, there's loads of distortion going on here. So really dirty, way over the top. And what I did is I backed this up here. Just some with orchestra sounds that I bounced off. Right, so that kind of covers the bass for this, for the drop and the Reese introduction. Let's dive into the drums. Okay, let's talk about the drums. The drums are in this top folder here, and there's actually not a lot of samples. Most of the work is actually pre-done. So again, on rainy days, I'll just make a load of drums, save them in folders, and then start cutting them up and using them again to make a tune. So I'll go through the elements. There's one kick. The kick is very, very simple. So one thing I will say about the drums is all the main elements are kind of short. I didn't want to kind of tune with like really long kind of tails. I wanted it quite tight and short. So yeah, this kick is made in serum. Really simple. It's just a sine wave pitched. LFO2 is controlling the amplitude. EQ, trash, clip control, just boosting that, driving that, +3. And again, some EQ. So this would have probably been done when I was mixing it. I probably felt there was just a bit too much bass in. The most simplest solution is just to notch a little bit out. So there's no layer on the kick. It's just a almost pure sine wave. So again, going on to the snares, or main snare really. There's a couple of different snares in this tune, but they're kind of the main element is just one sample basically, and this is just this snare one. So this is just from an old drum break. It's really simple. It's just a sine wave and some white noise. And then what I typically like to do is add a kind of resonant layer on top of that. And what I really like to do is to kind of tune that resonant layer with the actual tuning of the tune. So on top of it, kind of got this roomy kind of pingy sound. And again, this is also in serum. And what I did is I used 2 sine waves, slightly detuned with some bright white. A really cool technique is to frequency modulate your noise from a sine wave. So I've done that here. If I just solo this for a second. Another cool thing you can do is if you actually detune it, you start to get different tones. So I'm basically detuning a side wave, which is frequency modulating a bright white noise. So you kind of get almost stereo white noise in some instance, but it's a bit more modulated and it's a bit more interesting in terms of frequency. So yeah, so those are the tones. Top tone, which goes over. What I did is I cut a lot of low end out of this. I distorted it and then I added a tiny bit of reverb because I wanted to replicate that kind of acoustic drum recorded in a room studio kind of vibe. And the last EQ is just some mid-side processing. I just wanted to boost the top and make a bit of room here in the mid signal. Again, really, really short. I typically wouldn't make kind of snares this short, but it kind of worked here because it's a really fast-paced tune. So yeah, kick and snare, which which work. And then what I've done here is I've got some breaks basically, which I've just cut up from old breaks that I made. And these are the ones in yellow here. So I've just got some shuffles, ghost snares. And what these are basically, these are just breaks that I've pre-made, and I've just literally cut them up. So if we open this up, that will be a break I made, and I really like these shuffles, so I just cut them up and used them in the tune. Obviously there's a little bit of EQ on there. Again, with these ghost snares, I think this is the same instance. Probably be from another break. Or it's just, series of snares. So this may look very simple because there's hardly any processing on here, but all the work has gone into actually pre-making the sound itself, which would probably be addictive drums and lots of processing, lots of sampling. And then I make that into an audio file, and then simply I can just use this simple sound with just one EQ in the project. So just took some low end, took some high end out, just really simple stuff. And then to try and make the break sound a bit more lively, I wanted some extra hats on the top. So it's just giving that really, really fast kind of feel to the whole thing. So that's really cool. So if I play that together now. So super energetic, really short, and does the job. So again, the second part, when I was writing the tune, I felt that the snare ping, I felt that really didn't work with the movement of the bass in this section. So I had to go for a slightly different technique. Made a different version here. So kind of lo-fied, so to speak, and also a different tuning as well in the snare resonance as well, just to give that, just so it accompanies the switching bass line. Again, there's just a top layer on the snare. Again, I just added some extra bell sounds here, an extra shuffle. So these are the hats and the snare. So it's all really simple. It looks actually really simple, but as I said, a lot of the work has kind of gone in before. The hours and hours of developing the sounds, making the sounds from scratch, saving them, and preparing them for later use, so to speak. One of the things you will notice, and one of the things I like to do, is always put a slight fade in when the kick and snare is. So if you listen to this hi-hat sound, always put a little fade in on each kick and each snare, just so I'm protecting any transients, just so I'm kind of making sure my project is clean. I've got no clashing kicks or any of that kind of thing that goes on. One of the other things is the fill just before the break, and that's also used in this section here. So again, this fill was made in Addictive Drums, and again, hardly any processing, none, which is really cool. So that was made in Addictive Drums, and again, I put a fade in so I can just kind of retain that snare feeling. But again, that gives it a real fast, energetic feel. And below that are just some small edits. Just some small snare edits, just to kind of pull the attention away a bit and then suck you back into the main loop. And these are just, again, some snares from my pre-made snares which I've made previously, and again, because they're already pre-made, there's not much processing to it. So in terms of the drums, like super simple. If you look at my drum bus, there's also like zero compression, there's zero distortion. I really like to kind of do that before. I hardly ever do any processing like on the whole drum break unless it's like really needed. I definitely tried it on this tune, but it just didn't work. So really, it's a really simple setup in terms of the drums. So that's a quick breakdown of how I made Grains of Suna. I hope you learned something. I hope you found it interesting, or parts of it interesting. If you have any questions, I know I would love to have gone over like all the details of making everything. But if you have any questions, just hit me up on any of my socials and I'll be happy to answer any questions for you. And if you haven't checked the tune already, please do. It's on Spotify and available everywhere to download and buy. And really appreciate everyone's support. And last but not least, a massive shout out to everyone at Blackout for releasing the tune. Been following Blackout for years now, and it's a real pleasure to release on their label. See you soon. Peace.